In March 1965, the United States launched Operation Rolling Thunder, an air campaign that would last for 3 long years, making it one of the most extensive and costly bombing operations in U.S. history. To American leaders, the logic seemed simple: destroy enough targets, apply enough pressure, and North Vietnam would eventually stop supporting the fighting in the South. It was a strategy built on overwhelming force, advanced technology, and the belief that air power alone could bend an enemy's will. But as history shows, despite dropping more than 1 million tons of bombs, more than the entire Pacific theater in World War II, the campaign failed to achieve its political and military goals. So the question remains, why did one of the most powerful bombing campaigns ever attempted fail so completely? To understand the answer, we must go back to the strategic mindset, the political limitations, and the reality on the ground in Vietnam. After the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson faced increasing pressure to respond forcefully to North Vietnam. But Washington's goal was not total war. It was something very different, a limited war designed to send a message. Johnson and his advisors feared that an all-out attack might provoke China or the Soviet Union into entering the conflict. What they wanted instead was a campaign that signaled strength without triggering a wider war. And so Operation Rolling Thunder emerged as a compromise, hit North Vietnam hard enough to pressure them, but not hard enough to escalate the conflict. This produced a strategy full of contradictions. Air Force and Navy commanders were ordered to carry out repeated bombings, yet were also instructed to avoid many of the most important targets. Military aircraft flew thousands of missions, but always under strict political supervision. Rolling Thunder was born not from military logic, but from political caution. And that single fact shaped everything that followed. From the first day of Rolling Thunder, political leaders in Washington chose most of the targets. Not the generals, not the pilots. Decisions were made in the White House, often with limited military insight. Key bridges, ports, power stations, and communication hubs were placed on a restricted list. These were the targets that could have significantly damaged North Vietnam's ability to wage war, but they were considered too risky to attack. Instead, the U.S. focused on a slow, step-by-step escalation. Every few weeks, a new set of limited targets was added, creating a predictable rhythm that North Vietnam quickly learned to anticipate. Rather than shocking the enemy or causing strategic paralysis, the campaign was like a steadily ticking clock, expected, measured, and manageable. This political micromanagement created a situation where American pilots risked their lives without ever being able to strike the most effective positions. The result was an air campaign that consumed enormous resources but delivered little strategic impact. The very design of Rolling Thunder, a strategy guided more by fear of escalation than the pursuit of victory, made failure almost inevitable. Despite the destructive power of American aircraft, North Vietnam did not collapse under the shock of Rolling Thunder. Instead, it responded with a rapid and highly coordinated defense system, aided significantly by the Soviet Union. With Soviet advisors, equipment, and training, North Vietnam constructed an air defense web that was unprecedented for a developing nation. Anti-aircraft guns lined major cities, roads, and supply routes. Radar-guided artillery tracked U.S. planes day and night. And perhaps most importantly, the surface-to-air missile, the SAM-2, became a frequent and deadly threat. American pilots who had faced anti-aircraft fire in Korea or World War II found the Vietnamese defenses far more intense. Missiles could reach high-altitude bombers. Fighter jets were forced to fly low, exposing themselves to flak. And radar jamming often proved ineffective. The danger grew so severe that U.S. aircraft losses increased month after month. By the end of Rolling Thunder, more than 900 planes had been shot down, a staggering figure for a campaign that was expected to demonstrate American technological superiority. The heavy losses created pressure back home and further eroded confidence in the campaign. Rolling Thunder was supposed to weaken the enemy, but instead it drained American air power and morale. Perhaps the most underestimated factor in Rolling Thunder's failure was the resilience and adaptability of North Vietnam. Every time a bridge was destroyed, temporary bridges were constructed, sometimes within hours. When key roads were cratered by bombs, thousands of civilians and soldiers worked overnight to restore them. Entire villages mobilized to keep supply routes open. The US assumed that destroying infrastructure would cripple the flow of supplies to the south. But North Vietnam turned to flexibility and decentralization. Hidden footpaths, bypass roads, and camouflage supply lines emerged across the countryside. The most notable example was the Ho Chi Minh Trail, a vast interconnected network of jungle routes spanning Laos and Cambodia. Despite relentless bombing, the trail remained operational throughout the war. It became a symbol of North Vietnam's ability to adapt faster than the US could destroy. For every target the US hit, the North had a workaround. Even when destruction was severe, manpower compensated. Tens of thousands of workers, drivers, engineers, and volunteers kept supplies moving regardless of the danger. Rolling Thunder aimed to disrupt the enemy's logistics, but the North's determination and adaptability meant that the US could never achieve that goal. At the heart of Rolling Thunder's failure was a deeper misunderstanding. The belief that modern air power could break the will of an enemy fighting for political and national survival. US leaders believed that inflicting enough damage would force the North to negotiate, but for North Vietnam, the war was existential. Material losses could be repaired, human losses could be mourned, but the goal, reunification and independence, remained non-negotiable. This was not a war of attrition alone. It was a war of ideology, nationalism, and willpower. Bombs could destroy bridges and factories, but they could not destroy the determination to fight. The assumption that strategic bombing would lead to political collapse was fundamentally flawed. By misreading the motivations and resilience of its opponent, the United States committed to a strategy that was doomed from the start. Rolling Thunder was a massive show of force, but force alone cannot win a war whose center of gravity is the human will. In 1968, Operation Rolling Thunder came to an end. The campaign had cost billions of dollars, thousands of lives, and hundreds of aircraft. Yet the political and military objectives remained unmet. North Vietnam was not weakened. Its supply routes continued to function. Its government did not waver. Rolling Thunder, one of the largest bombing campaigns in history, became a symbol of the limits of air power when used without a coherent strategy. It demonstrated that overwhelming force cannot compensate for unclear objectives, political restrictions, or a failure to understand the enemy's motivations. The campaign did not fail because the US lacked bombs. It failed because it misunderstood the kind of war it was trying to fight. Today, Rolling Thunder stands as a cautionary tale, a reminder that technology and power alone cannot guarantee victory. Wars are ultimately shaped not only by weapons, but by strategy, culture, resilience, and the human will to endure. And in Vietnam, that will proved far stronger than anyone in Washington expected.